Welcome to the Global Experience Leaders series, where we talk to the leaders behind the multilingual digital future, how they lead, innovate, and grow their careers. I'm Spence Green, CEO of Lilt, and this week we're joined by Anna Schlegel, Vice President of the Global Portfolio to Market Organization at NetApp. Anna's worked in the tech industry in Silicon Valley for over 20 years, leading teams at Cisco, VMware, Xerox, and Verisign. She's also the co-founder of Women in Localization, the leading professional organization for women in the localization industry with over 5,000 members worldwide. All right, today I'm joined by Anna Schlegel, who's the Vice President of Global Portfolio to Market, which is a unique title that we'll talk about at NetApp. Anna, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Spence.
Okay, so I like to start these by talking about how you got into language and decided to make a life out of that. So I was reading a bit about you, both in your book and a little bit about you separately. And you're Catalan, you speak several different languages. You went to undergrad in Germany, where you majored in English and wrote a thesis on Kazuo Ishiguro, who's a Japanese writer who writes in English, so lots of language. I'm assuming that informed somehow your decisions later on, but maybe tell us about growing up in such a polyglot culture.
Sure. Yeah, I was born polyglot because I am Catalan, and I'm literally, let's say, 15 minutes away from the French border. So when we went shopping, it was either the French supermarket or the Catalan supermarket was very easy for us. My father's family is Spanish, my mother's family is Catalan. And also in the summer, Catalans go to the coast a lot, where I would hear all different types of languages. I was fascinated by Swedish, for example, or Flemish. Lots of French. I had a lot of French friends that I would see every year. Not so many Italians, because Italians have a beautiful coast to go and enjoy in the summer, but there's a lot of Brits, that come to Catalonia in the summer, a lot of Germans. It's the beautiful weather, right? We would spend months every year, from the day the school finished until the day the school started. Catalan kids have 3 months off. And so we would be in this linguistic immersion school at the beach, and we would learn from each other because we played together all day long. So I don't know, that's how you grow up.
And even growing up in a culture like that, localization's not, sort of the first thing that children think of as a career when they grow up or they're exposed to. So what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Well, what my dream would have been was to be a volleyball player, a professional volleyball player, and play forever. I played volleyball all the way until I came to the United States. But I didn't see how to make a career out of it, And in the meantime, I was studying philology. I did my undergrad in the Universitat de Barcelona, in Barcelona downtown, and then I did my postgraduate studies in Berlin. When I enrolled in Barcelona, I enrolled to study English philology with, a lot of American studies. The classes were very full. Everybody wanted to learn English and about Americans and America. This was this big thing for us, But there were too many people, and I'm like, wow, I need to do something else. I need to specialize differently. And I begged, the German faculty to let me in. They said, well, what do you know about Germany? I said, well, I know one word. And so I had to, put some extra batteries. At that time, this faculty undergrad was 5 years. And so I immediately got a job to pay for a 5th year student to teach me every day, the art of German philology. And so it was every single, long weekend that I had, I started going to Germany and just there was no other way, because the teachers were speaking to me in German, right?
And then you finished your postgrad in Berlin,
Yeah.
and you moved to San Francisco, and you started a company because that's what one does.
Because that's
And,
what.
and what was that company?
So the company was called the San Francisco Translating Firm. I wanted to make it very clear that it was in San Francisco, that it was about translations. At that time, I came in 19.
You did some concept testing with your target customers to come up with
like,
that name.
That's what we do. Yeah, that's it. I have to tell you that I didn't have one single client the first year. But
That's
what I did.
Not unusual for starting a company, I can tell you.
Yeah. But what I did is I got to meet maybe a couple hundred translators. And so they taught me everything, because coming in from Europe, I didn't know how to pay a translator, what were the languages that the city of San Francisco needed, what companies needed the translations. And I remember one day being in my apartment. Obviously, I had to get another job, right? And I was making dinner, and I had a business line that rang for the first time. And it was a hospital in San Francisco saying, we need these manuals in all these languages. And I pretended that I was like super experienced, and I said yes. And that was my first paying client. And so one thing came after the other. I think I became, also, it was interesting, this was in 92. The city of San Francisco was already looking for diversity. So because I was a female, and they thought I was Latina, which, if you come from Europe, you don't consider yourself a Latina, but they're like, oh, she speaks Spanish, she's a Latina. Okay.
Right.
Okay, all right. So I started getting a lot of contracts for being a Latina. I'm like, I'm not a Latina, but okay, I'll take the contracts. And so I was labeled, female and Latina. And so I started working quite a bit with the city of San Francisco. I did a lot of work for the airport of San Francisco. And then one day, a technical company called me and said, we have this product, and this product needs to go into these markets. Can you help us? And so that's how I got into the high-tech world of globalization.
Okay, so that takes us into your career, and then moving on into doing globalization for companies. And
Sure.
you made a series of moves. You went to Cisco and Xerox and Verisign before landing at NetApp, where you've been climbing the ranks for over a decade now. So maybe take us through how you thought about that early phase of your career, and what each one of these moves added to get you to where you are today.
So when I had the startup, it actually was making quite a bit of money. It was becoming a thing. It was a very big decision. I got a phone call from Cisco Systems through one of my clients. One of my clients said, well, there's this lady in San Francisco that has all these translators, and she could replicate her business inside of Cisco. And it was a very big decision for me to say, well, do I want to keep being a sole proprietor and my own CEO and have my own vacations, or go into a large corporation? Cisco at that time was not what Cisco is today. Cisco at that time, when I joined, I think there were 20,000 employees, but it was very, very US centric. Mm-hmm. And so it's at Cisco where I learned, that I needed software, that we needed a team, that we needed to understand what were the countries that they wanted to go to, that Cisco was a huge, already big company with 20,000 people that didn't know that we existed, right? And so there is where we learned that to globalize a company, you cannot just localize a piece of it. You need to localize the whole pie. But I was very young. We made a lot of mistakes, I'm sure. I had to learn Trados. And even at that time spent, we played already with machine translation. This is in 1996. I did a test in London with IBM because they thought that machines could replace us, and I went to test that out, and I thought that they were crazy, but I went to test it out. And so that's how I got into it. The word localization didn't exist back then. The first time I heard the word localization was through Michelle Carlson, who was the head of localization at Yahoo. And Yahoo was one of the first companies that was really localizing very seriously. And so I went to talk to her and I said, what is this localization thing? Like, what does it mean? And it was really scaring me because I was a linguist and a translator and a globalizer. And so little by little, that's how we started to understand what it was, what it took. After Cisco, I went to Xerox. And at Xerox, I became the head of their web team, the global web team. So the exercise there was to learn digital presence, and it was fascinating because they wanted me to get them into 30 new countries, but it was all online, So there I learned the art of what we used to call webmasters, right? Today is the digital transformation. So I had a very good time there understanding how do you form a web team and how do you do QA, and we were selling it to governments, and that was fascinating. I think from Xerox, where did I get hired? I went to Verisign. Verisign is the S on the HTTPS, it secures the internet. And there I became both things. So there they trusted me to start the localization team and their global web presence. And so that was powerful, right? Because you're now in charge of whatever it is that they're saying online. I had the power to globalize it. So that Verisign was a lot of fun because localization alone as its own little translating agency inside of a company, it's kind of boring. It's more like a service, right? But now I was the executive producer for their digital infrastructure, that was fun. And after Verisign, I think I was hired to be the head of globalization at VMware. Well, that was a whole other beast, right? VMware, incredible powerhouse. And my job was to get them into China. And so I remember traveling with Diane Green, your same last name, was the CEO at that time. Diane and I.
She has an E on the end.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Slight difference, right?
Yeah. Sounds like. And so that was real business. That was like, okay, you're close to the CEO, you're traveling to the senior vice president of sales. I reported for a little bit to the chief operating officer. And that's where I learned, like, okay, that's what these people do all day long. They understand where to go, what products to take. It was more a business discussion. And so I went from worrying about translations and the cost and vendors to, wow, this is an actual business and we need to make money, and what are the countries? So the evolution has been really, really cool. And then when I came to NetApp, I started again managing the web team. So that's how I came in, and very quickly they said, well, this lady used to be the head of globalization at VMware. We probably need to be thinking about globalization for NetApp. And so that's how I started both things as well. So the digital presence and then the globalization team. And then over the past 6-7 years, they've given me other things to work about.
I think these steps taking you from running a translation agency to being an internal service provider to picking up operational and business skills are, so important. And I want to quote from your book. The last chapter of your book is about having an elevator pitch. And you write, I realized that the bigger my team grew, the more important it was that we all said more or less the same things. Was Latin America an important goal? What was the mission for our full combined effort? We're here to make money, exclamation point. It all comes down to business. I decided that if we were able to correlate our work with international revenue, we would be respected and not seen as a service. To that end, we consciously decided to move away from being a service to being an incredible asset for the company. The goals need to be clearly aligned with the CEO's vision. I think so many localization teams struggle with this because the business aspect of it maybe is overlooked, that you're a partner for the business. How would you coach and encourage localization leaders to more align with the sort of mission and business goals of the company as you move to the point where you're working with Diane, who's the co-founder of the company, and aligning closely with her goals like you did at VMware?
CEOs and chief strategy officers are the ones that decide where you're going, what countries, where you're entering, how you're entering into a country. If you're not aligned to them, then you become a service. When there are layoffs, you're a shared service and you're very dispensable. Then they start talking about managed services, etc. All these companies are there to make money. They make billions of dollars, right? I would recommend anybody who is one person. Many times I was the first person, right? When I went into NetApp, I was one person. So you have to start to ask questions, probably at the chief strategy office or the VP of strategy. Maybe there's no chief strategy officer, but go right away to your strategy team, introduce yourself and ask the right questions. What are the countries that we're entering? Where is it that we're not doing well? And then you need to tease out, why is it that we're not doing well? Maybe it's a pricing issue. Maybe the product isn't globalized. Maybe there's no support infrastructure. Maybe nowadays it's all about cloud services, right? Maybe there's no data center that understands the policies of that country. You need to become a business person, get out of the idea that you're running a translations team. And I think we see, through studies from Common Sense Advisory or Women in Localization or NIMSI, that the translation business is well alive and kicking, but there's not a lot of business strategies. There's not a lot of globalization strategy. To be able to go and speak in front of a CEO, which I have now done in every company, you have to be very well prepared. You have to understand the international revenue. So, for example, you can think of company A maybe has 17% of the revenue from international, and the rest is from Canada or from the United States or from the UK. Well, is that acceptable? Would you like that 17 to go to 25%? Okay, so we're going to have to make some moves, some investments, right? And I obviously, because I had my own company, you have to think as a business. You have to play a lot of games of what is important, what are the levers for the company to make money externally. And I don't think a lot of people study that. We train a lot of people, for example, from NetApp, we go to the Monterey Institute all the time. They learn about how to translate, how to be an incredible interpreter, how to prepare, for an executive. But I think, and I've presented at Stanford, I've presented at the PhD program at Stanford, where they cannot imagine what are they going to do once they're done. And the reality is, once you enter a corporation, you're part of that machinery. And all your goal is to make that product super successful somewhere else, right? And so the orchestration may be very different per company. Some companies start with marketing, some companies start in engineering. Some companies are okay just having a beautiful website localized in different languages. But what happens is that you're creating like a fake reality, right? If you attract your customer in French, but then the product is in Italian or the product is in English, your customers is not going to take you seriously, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things when we were talking about how you grew the team at NetApp, you said that it was important the closer you got to the product and to the product life cycle, and the more integrated you've made both your team and language into that, correspondingly, the more your influence and scope grew. So maybe take us through both the organization, a brief organizational history, but also an innovation history, because there's sort of technology and process that goes along with getting more tightly integrated in the product life cycle. How did that develop over time?
So you have to be impeccable with how you're, giving your translations, your linguistics, the whole ecosystem of the content management systems, the translation management systems. You have to have top vendors. That's a given. Okay, so you need to be really good at this so that people take you seriously. One thing that I observed, and I've observed it everywhere I've worked, is that these companies, these are all Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, have many product managers. These product managers are coming in through acquisitions, they're coming in, they used to be presidents at another company, they're superstars. They're vice presidents, senior vice presidents of product, they're general managers of product. It doesn't mean that they've traveled outside of the United States. So that was my aha. Oh, maybe they spent a nice vacation in Italy, but they necessarily didn't place a product in Italy. And so I actually presented at our C-suite, I think it's 3 years ago, a globalization maturity model that we developed inside of the company to show what departments were really truly global and what departments were lagging behind. And I think I did a good job in presenting that, because what my CEO said afterwards is, what else do you see here? And I said, well, I see disconnects. I see disconnects between sales and product. I see disconnects between product and support. I see disconnect between these product managers and sales, strategy office. And he said, what would you do? And I said, I would change how we work at NetApp, And so he said, okay, go ahead and do that. So that is called the PLC. So the product life cycle is the phases and the questions and the gates and the thinking from nothing to a super successful product. So a product manager has an idea or a solution that needs to get financed. Okay, so think of like Shark Tank, for example, on TV, the TV show where somebody goes and look at how an incredible product I have. Product managers do that as well, right? So what I started doing is I retrained the questions throughout the product life cycle. Before, the product life cycle would ask, how are you going to market? And I read many, maybe 70 PRDs that would say, we're going global. Or the answer would be www. Well, that's not very sophisticated, right? So what we started doing is we slowed down the process to say, that doesn't mean anything. If you're a product manager, you're gonna have to tell me if your product is incubating, what's the one country you're gonna incubate it in? If your product is growing, you're gonna give me 3 or 4 countries. If your product is ready to go global, we're talking 140 countries. But before your product can go global, we need a ton of stuff. The product needs to be secure. You need to have global references. You need to spell out, the OEMs, the channel, the pathways. So we reinvented all of it. Basically, we created the rails so that the product managers have to think through not just globalization, but many other things. Because when the globalization team goes to a product manager and asks, tell me where you're going to sell this product, and they say, in Europe, that doesn't help. You need the product manager to say, we're going to start in Germany, and then you can do something with them, right? You can start preparing the whole German machinery. And so that's how my title became the product life cycle. Now, that is powerful, right? Because from a globalization perspective, we have embedded the questions from the very beginning. Does it make sense to enter this product into this country? All the way until you sunset the product, how are we going to remove this product out of these countries? I have never seen anybody see that before, but basically we went from being a translations team to a localizations team to a globalizations team. Then I inherited the content strategy for the company. Then I inherited the engineering workflows. And then now we're creating the digital platform for all these products.
Yeah, it's amazing if you can get up in a product-oriented company, a technology company, if you can get up to the product manager at the product requirements document at the PRD level, which is where the design starts and the content strategy starts. And then a lot of the sort of downstream problems with global go-to-market that you're sort of like playing catch up, you can start to preempt.
Yes, so before everybody was like approved next, approved next, approved next. Now was like, nope, not approved. So that's the power. That's the power of managing the PLC. So now my name, there's many names, right? But now my name is one of the approvers that says, I've read where you're going, it makes sense to me, and now my team will know what to do. Because otherwise, they are sailing in a huge ocean, right? And so for these companies, I mean, you think of how Amazon works or Google works, everything needs to be extremely clear, super clarity, super transparent. Otherwise, we're just wasting hours, right?
Yeah. So your influence and contributions go out well beyond NetApp. And as I mentioned, you wrote a book, you speak, but perhaps one of your most important contributions has been Women in Localization, which you co-founded. And now, to my knowledge, is perhaps the largest professional group in our industry with thousands of members worldwide. So what was the origin story and the motivation for founding Women in Localization?
We are so happy that we did this. Oh my God, I'm happy every day. I get emails every day. So Women in Localization was founded by Eva Klaudinova, Sylvia Vari, and myself. We were all in the same team. So Sylvia was my
at Verisign, is that right?
At Verisign. So sorry, yeah, we were at Verisign. So Sylvia was my head of global digital, and Eva was my lead for localization. So they were both in my team. And we used to talk a lot about where the women. So we did a lot of work, but we didn't see a lot of women on top. And even I remember we were trying to meet with the CMO or trying to meet with the CEO. We weren't allowed to do that. We're like, well, that's not nice, because we had a lot of things to say, right, about globalization. So we decided, I remember the cube where we said, we are going to do this. And this is like 12, 13 years ago. I have that picture that we said, we're sisters, we're going to do this. The first thing we did is we went out drinking, and we asked a couple, 2 or 3 girlfriends if they thought it was a good idea. So the 3 of us, we became 5. The first event, we still have the photo. We all look so young and nice. And we went to a downtown Campbell or Sunnyvale, and it was already 20 of us. And then the 20 became 50. The first person that called us from the outside was from Ireland. And Eva said, I know this person. And that's when we started creating like a franchise model.
Mm-hmm.
We had no clue that it would become this phenomenon. But very quickly, we realized that we needed some sort of a board formation. We didn't call ourselves a board before we became a nonprofit, but it was so fun. I mean, it was Eva, Anna, and Sylvia in my living room, or in Sylvia's living room, or in Eva's living room, just designing everything. Everybody wanted to join. Everybody wanted to join from around the world. Everybody wanted to be part of it. So the three of us were like, do you know her? What do we do? And the one thing we knew how to do is to go global, right? And so I think the first chapter we opened was in Ireland, and then we went to Seattle. And now, I mean, the wait list is very, very, very long. We are now in 30 sites, or 30 chapters. And we had to get very serious because we had to, create a formal board. We have advisors, we rotate presidents, like I've been president too many times, Sylvia has been president too many times, Eva has been president too many times. Then we said, okay, let's let other ladies be the presidents, right? We will always be the founders, we're always there. We talk about women in localization every day. It's here, it's in our brains. But yeah, we're thousands of members. There was a beautiful event yesterday where 5 of them were on a panel, and it just brings so much joy, right? They're women in localization not only creates the community, but one of our ideas is to create a lot of tiger teams to resolve different things. And we give the women the title director. And we train them on how to be a director. So it's just not to unite localization and advance the profession, but to empower women as well.
And how important has it been in your career, that community aspect? Certainly creating a group is an enormous contribution, but even participation earlier in your career to what you've been able to achieve later on.
Well, I think it's a huge part, right? I mean, I can pick up the phone to Eva or Sylvia, they pick it up in 1 second, right? I mean, I can pick up the phone, and I've met so many people. We've given so many people jobs. We're so well networked. Today, so you have to imagine that these 30 chapters, each one of them puts on a very interesting topic 4 times a year. So that's 120 webinars a year, right? We've created it's a huge machinery. And so you end up meeting everybody. I remember the day, a few years in, we're like, we probably should let the guys come in and become members, because at the beginning it was like, we don't like the guys, but we were all married, and we all have boys and stuff. Yeah. But then we're like, we're so bad. We can't be just the women, right? Because we need everybody supporting diversity, and it's a trip. It's a trip, and it's just growing, and it's fascinating. And nowadays, Ceci Maldonado is the president this year. I heard her speak yesterday, and it gave me so much joy, to somebody who started as a volunteer is now the president. And so that's what we're after, just really empowering women.
Yeah, you really have broadened it to the whole community. I remember the first time I was invited to an event, and I wasn't quite sure, like, am I welcome here? Do I need to show a card or something like that? But you got there, and it was really a whole localization community event.
Everybody's welcome. Everybody's
right.
welcome. The only thing that we ask is, are you passionate about globalization?
That's right.
If the answer is yes, you're in.
You're in. That's the card you got to show. Okay, I want to ask you one last question, since you're sort of out in the world and talking to people and seeing what's going on. I want to talk about innovation for a minute. And I think when we talk about innovation, we typically jump directly to technology, which then reduces to these days some conversation about machine translation or something like that. But actually innovation, there's process innovation, there's people innovation, organizational innovation, which you've talked about with the sort of product life cycle. And I wonder, what are the, one or two most important innovations that you've embraced or implemented over the last few years, and or that you're excited about right now that you think is going to have a high impact both in your organization and broadly over the next couple of years?
I don't think you know this, but 2 days ago, my first innovation, when notarized, uploaded into the IP database of the United States. And we have two colleagues of mine and I made a post on LinkedIn, so if anybody wants to go. But we have designed an internationalization mechanism that doesn't require any license or any software. And that's never been done before, so we're crazy about it. And I think we're looking at doing a very small workshop to tease it out a little bit because it's a trade secret still. But basically, when I saw that I had to convince so many developers to internationalize or use some sort of software and didn't even want to install the software, I got tired of them. And we thought, well, we need to go around them. And so we've created a self-healing machine learning mechanism based on artificial intelligence to correct internationalization for any product. That is my obsession right now. It's unbelievable. A lot of people want to see it already. And what we are going to try to do is actually to make it a product, because everybody's like, open source this thing, open source this thing. And so we're talking right now within the company to see what is it that we can do if we could share it to the world. So that's one. Obviously the other piece that's very, very important is neural machine learning, and to see where that is going. I think I am so proud of linguists and philologists, right? They don't all need to be like teachers of English. Like they're training Siri, and they're training Alexa, and they're training the Tesla voice commands. And I saw Tesla speaking Catalan now. So those things like made me very happy, because still there's a lot of countries trying to colonize others through language, and I don't like that. I am in huge favor of preserving tradition and language and the beautiful, folklore of all the corners of the world. And so whatever we can do spans to categorize those languages and keep them alive, right? And I think that AI can help quite a bit with that.
I think you're right. Well, Anna, thanks for this discussion, and we'll look forward to being able to see and use this technology and approach that you've developed.
I hope so. I hope so very soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you. Thank you very much.